Lawmakers in Florida are now proposing gun control policy.
Wow.
Gun control policy in Florida, not in California, not in New York, but in Florida. And I would like to speculate that the reason why is because some of the victims in the Parkland, Florida shooting have been aggressive in going after these politicians who for decades have done absolutely nothing to protect Americans from gun violence. So recently, Florida Governor Rick Scott gave a press conference and shared what his proposals are. Take a look.
I want to make it virtually impossible for anyone who has mental issues to use a gun. I want to make it virtually impossible for anyone who is a danger to themselves or others to use a gun. I want to create a new program in Florida. I call it the Violent Threat Restraining Order. This will allow a court to prohibit a violent or mentally ill person from purchasing or possessing a firearm or any other weapon when either a family member, community welfare expert, or law enforcement officer files a sworn request and presents evidence to the court of a threat of violence involving firearms or other weapons. Also, we will require all individuals purchasing firearms to be 21 or older. There will be exceptions for active duty and reserve military and spouses, National Guard members, and law enforcement. Next, we will prohibit a person from possessing or purchasing a firearm if they are subject to an injunction for protection against stalking, cyber stalking, dating violence, repeat violence, sexual violence, or domestic violence. And we will completely ban the purchase or sale of bump stocks.
So these are his proposals. Of course, it is now up to lawmakers in Florida to draft this legislation and then vote on it. But it appears as though they are in favor of it. We'll see how it plays out. Also, Scott's plan would not arm teachers, which is interesting because you hear that from a lot of Republican lawmakers. Though lawmakers said their own proposals would create a, quote, Marshall program to allow teachers who have had enough hours of training with law enforcement to be armed on campus.
So that's a hybrid model. You don't have to arm all the teachers, but if a teacher has gone through the training, they will allow them to be armed, which I think is a disastrous idea.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so this is a mixed bag. So are these proposals good enough? Not remotely. So it still doesn't ban assault rifles like the AR-15, and that is what most of the survivors are calling for. That's what the whole country, not the whole country, but a majority of the country is calling for. There's a lot more here. Closing the loophole on gun shows is not in here, and I can go on and on. But is it good news that the immovable Republicans funded by the NRA have moved a little bit? It is nearly shocking, and yes, that is good news. So bump stocks is a small thing, but I'll take it. Moving the age up to 21 is tiny. I mean, so in the state of Florida, as is the case in most of the country, you could buy an AR-15, but you couldn't buy a beer. And of course, the NRA is livid about this. They're like, how dare you? We bought you lock, stock, and barrel, and now you have deviated from us by about 5%. It is intolerable. We were making money selling to 19 and 20-year-olds, and now you foreclosed that, a tiny amount that will affect our profit margins. How dare you, right? So, and what did the NRA say? They said, this restricts a constitutional right for those poor kids who are 19 and 20 years old in the state of Florida. But by that logic, are we not allowed to put any age limit on weapons? And you are going to call that a constitutional right? Is it a constitutional right of 13-year-olds, 7-year-olds, 4-year-olds to have automatic weapons that could cut down dozens of people at a time?
I mean, that was coming. That was coming. I mean, they work so aggressively to loosen any and all gun laws that we currently have in place. But I also want to note that even if Rick Scott proposed the strictest gun laws and somehow lawmakers in Florida voted in favor of it, we live in one country.
That's right.
Right? Florida isn't an island. I mean, sometimes we wish it was, but Florida isn't an island, right? It is connected to mainland USA. And so it doesn't matter what you do in one state or the other. It's very easy to cross state lines and purchase weapons from a state where it's much easier to, buy these weapons without the restrictions that you have in a more strict state.
So I'll give a really small caveat to that. Studies show that states with tighter gun controls do have less gun violence. Now, it's true that you can just cross over the border, and they do, and these are small effects. The much larger effects are countries that do gun control overall have way lower violence than we do in America. Yeah. And that is because we are physically separated. Japan has almost no gun violence because they don't allow guns. Right. Wow, it's not that complicated. Well, they'll get guns anyway. No, they won't. They don't get them in Japan. That's why almost nobody dies from guns in Japan.
Well, being that so many of these people who are doing these mass murders do buy their guns legally, then this is, this makes sense. I'm from Florida. And what's really interesting, I was thinking about that when I was reading that article. What about the rest of the country? Mm-hmm. What about the rest of America? I tell you, when I saw those kids, I'm from Florida and I experienced gun violence in my high school. And it was, and here I go telling one of my stories again, because that's what I do. But it's something that is just a reality when you're in the South and you're in South Florida. But, when do these people sit down and decide what are the ages of mental capacity, accountability? It's so interesting that it always shifts for the benefit of an organization that makes money.
Yeah.
And everything is so interesting when, the age for an abortion, consenting for this, consenting for sex, what's statutory rape, how old you, people get so caught up in this, the regular people who don't realize that the motivation behind a lot of this stuff has to do with profit and gain. Mm-hmm. And so I just think about this stuff and the casualties of, those children. We don't get to see the bodies of those little kids from Sandy Hook. We don't see the bodies, right? So we walk away, it's a hashtag, rest in peace, we make our post and we go on about our days. But those people are preparing for funerals and the rest of their lives without their children, which feels so unnatural to have to bury your child. So when I saw this video on this man that went viral who had the NRA tattoo, and was very pro Second Amendment, and he had one of those guns, and he burned it in half, and said that he couldn't, with good conscience, that gun would not be available for a mass murder. He wasn't going to resell it. He destroyed it. And he's a Second Amendment guy. I spoke out about this, and then I got all these guys saying, well, when the government comes to get us, good luck with that. Did you not see what happened to that dude who shot the cops in Dallas and they sent a robot for him? Do you really think that your guns and your ammo and your master plan is gonna take down the US government and their militia? You're crazy.
The government has already come for us.
Absolutely.
I mean, look, just think about how many of our freedoms we've willy-nilly given up in the name of national security. Yeah. Think about, the opportunities that have been taken away from us, the doors that have been shut by the very people who took advantage of those opportunities in this country, right? The government's already come for us, and Americans have been complacent and they've sat back and they've taken it. Yeah. The gun rights activists who make that argument, they use the same fear-mongering tactic that we see from the NRA. They know that they don't stand a chance against the US military with their drones, with their tanks.
That's right.
Good luck with your guns. But look, by the way, I also don't like the framing that they use when they make it seem as though if you want some form of gun control, you're anti-Second Amendment.
That's right.
It does not mean you're anti-Second Amendment.
That's right.
I believe in the Second Amendment. I do not want to ban guns. In fact, the majority of the students that I've heard from Parkland, Florida, do not want to ban guns. But they did think it was a little strange that in the state of Florida, there was an age limit when it came to buying handguns, but there wasn't an age limit when it came to AR-15s. That's right. That is common sense gun legislation that maybe the country should consider.
And so one last thing. So they think that they're going to pressure the government to keep their rights if the Second Amendment protects all the other amendments. Okay, let's talk about reality. So how would you use the Second Amendment to guarantee your other rights? What, you would threaten to shoot cops, politicians? How would you do that, right? In reality, What did the kids who were the survivors of the shooting do? They applied political pressure.
That's right.
And Rick Scott is going to run, very likely to run for Senate. So he's now the governor and he wants to run for senator. So he responded to the political pressure. Right. So he was worried they're not going to vote for him. So all of a sudden he gives you a concession. If you had gone and exercised your Second Amendment rights and said, Rick Scott, I'm going to shoot you, he would not have responded to that pressure. You would be sitting in prison today.
That's right.
So be sensible, be practical, and be American. And the American way to address these issues is through politics and democracy. What you just watched was one of the videos that we do today, but we actually do a whole 2-hour show every single day. It's a podcast. You could watch it in video or listen to it as audio. You can download it, you can stream it, and you get it completely ad-free if you could become a member of the Young Turks. TYTnetwork.com/join.